Listen. This is not the way of it. This is not the way of it. All that shouting. All that noise.
This was the last architect's office cassette.
Do that again.
This is Cadenza Coda.
What was the most unusual cassette you ever got in the mail in terms of packaging?
Most gorgeous is over here. I think this was the most gorgeous. It was from that Japanese fella. This one I think is real pretty. Xmalo, isn't that a pretty one? Is that the way you say it? YXIMALLO, Xmalo. Cassette culture thing, yes.
So talk about cassette culture.
Well, you know, I had written, you know, the diatribes about that as well, that, you know, about the virtue of the cassette. To me, it was a great thing that you could self-publish on a cassette, and it was small and convenient to send. I mean, what else were you going to do?
This movie sounds living. What's that?
I lived in a house, it was called Big City, and there's Big City Central, Big City North, South, East, and West. And in there was about, maybe 30 different people. Many of them were musicians. Some of them were very good. Some of us decided we wanted to play too. So we did. And since it was Big City, we became the in-house orchestra. And whenever there was a house party, we played the house party.
So it was the Big City
Orchestra.
Oh, okay.
And for some reason, we have never had the good sense to drop it. Always listening to music. Strange music probably started with Dr. Demento. This is a project we've been working on for about 20 years, 22 years. It's salty sea shanties for young pirates. Although we had to take off the young pirates because they're really dirty. So it comes with the vinyl, it comes with lovely art, and right now we're working on, each one's going to be different. So Robo made a lino, and we've been lino printing them all, 500 of them. And then we're hand coloring them all and rubber stamping them all, and including the lovely cassette and crossbones. We're having parties where we have artists come over, and we'll get like 6 or 8 artists and 2 or 3 big folding tables here. And we're working on, the last one we did all of the cutting, all of the printing, and now we're coloring in. So we've got another party coming up soon, and get all
How
these
much does each
people.
one cost?
I think they'll probably be like $10. So not at all commiserate with the amount of effort put into them, of course. Here's a good example of a fun cassette release, Soviet France, and the lovely radioactive feather inside there, which I lick all the time. This one did not come to me in the mail. It's a steel plate with the little cassette inside. The cassette inside. I still have boxes and boxes, as you can see. I'm going to make him show some of these, but I probably have 15, 20 wooden boxes like this filled with all of the great fun packaging. You know, the Rising from the Red Sand series. That was great. Boy, was that a great series. This is a cardboard tube that's been covered with magnetic tape, recording tape, and then there's the information for the show, you know, any kind of strange packaging you could do. And we did a few as well ourselves.
I started playing violin when I was 7 years old, and I was had private lessons, played in orchestra all the way until I was 18 years old. Even sat first chair in an orchestra violin, so Suzuki style, went through all the books, had private lessons, orchestras, oh my gosh. I think that was one of the first times where I realized recording was, you know, you'd actually see them making a record when you'd be performing live. That was pretty intriguing, yeah. I met him in music theory class. I was in high school and I had enough credits, so I went to college. I met him in music theory class and he was really obnoxious. And he kept correcting the teacher over and over, which was, I mean, just kept me, I kept looking at him, you know, like, who is this guy?
From probably about 13, I wanted to play music or do music, and I just found it dissatisfying. I mean, again, I liked pop, I liked, you know, rock music, and there was just something that struck me here that was just, it wasn't regular. It wasn't. I mean, part of my feeling about it is this kind of stuff is this kind of music and sound is. You can't be manipulated quite as easily by this, so that in rock, pop, music, movies, books, your actual emotions can be totally manipulated by how the writing is, how the filmmaker makes it, how the pop song goes, you know, just brings you to tears or laughter, whatever. And I think a lot of it was just a desire not to be manipulated by the media. You're facing your own, not demons, but your own preconceptions about what's music, what's sound.
I remember the first audio experience I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, and I had a tape by Bill Cosby, cassette tape, and he was talking, and there was a phrase that he said. He was going to say money, but he corrected himself and he said bread, and he said bread, and I just liked that phrase so much, so I kept hitting the little rewind button on it, and I'd sit for an hour and just hear bread, bread. When I was going to university in Santa Barbara at UCSB, they had an electronic music lab there, and that was just it for me. I loved it. You could block off time as a student in the lab, so I'd block off the last hours of the day, go in about 10 o'clock at night and just come out when the sun's up in the morning and making my own electronic music. After I left college, I'd had all of this stuff that I'd put together for the last 4 or 5 years, and decided I want to get it out there. I want to put it out on cassette, start a label, and that's what I did, Swinging Axe.
Love me.
imagine what things were back when people communicated with music before there was any modern technologies or avenues to do it. You know, it's like a core connection that continues to thread everything together and make it more like a communal experience. You escape from the given and you try something new and find out it's much more rewarding and fulfilling to experience it on that level. So I think that's what is the juice, so to speak, of the whole scene, is that you have that one-on-one and more personal, intimate relation with the human factor behind the sound.
When you're performing live and collaborating with people, you're hitting a whole new level on that razor of whether it's going to work or not. But it really does, because what it does is it really forces you to listen. And I, as a non-musician, find that I really have to be good at least as good at listening as I am at playing. That's the real skill. That's what collaborating teaches you an awful lot of. It's like listening. When are you supposed to talk? When are you supposed to converse back? What is the dialogue? How does it flow? And how do the two of you dialogue outside of just the two of you?
So you say that term non-musician, so you feel like you're a non-musician making music.
Yeah. I've got good ears. And I'm good with my fingers, so I can use the technology to, but most songs are math. So if you can do some basic math skills, you can figure out how to put most music together.
My background, of course, my mother's a piano teacher, so I was raised listening to things like the Brahms variations on a theme by Haydn and so forth. Of course, what we really liked when I was like up until sixth grade anyway, was Tijuana brass. But I got interested in trumpet, so I started cornet trumpet in grade school, switched to French horn in junior high. And by that time, Clockwork Orange comes out, and that became this thing about how great classical music is. So Beethoven's Ninth in that movie, for example, or La Gazza Ladra by Rossini. And then from there I started, listening to classical music, and maybe even a little bit stoned doing it. So the background's classical music in the end. Music with a beat was something I had avoided because classical music's not like that. It's a floating melody more than it is something like a boom, boom, boom. So then, getting into the experimental music was where that was freed up.
Brian was practicing with his a friend that was staying at our house in California, in Eureka, and they needed a bass player. And so I got a bass, and I started playing. It wasn't much different than a violin, because they had the 4 strings, you know, same notes. I just figured it out.
Very different than them. All the rest of the apes went skulking in the valleys.
And when you played, you always felt like you're starting something crazy and new, and nobody's ever done it before. You know, the reactions of your audience. You know, when we were doing live shows, we were trying to do stuff that was different. You know, and when we started, you know, working with cassettes and sounds and loops, and then we realized other people were doing that, you know, through the magazines we were reading. And a lot of people were doing the same stuff we were doing. It's really crazy times, but it was beyond punk.
Well, the cassette culture for me was, then this is basically starting about 1980 or so, 81. So Sound of Pig, which was my cassette label, started in 1984, but for probably about 2 years before that, I started finding about cassettes and buying cassettes. Again, Op, you know, when I first started buying Op, they had probably 10 reviews and each issue, and it started expanding, and, you know, it was a pre-internet, so the fact that I could read about somebody's music that sounded kind of interesting and write them a letter and say, I'd like to, you know, originally buy your cassette or get your cassette, and someone would send me a cassette after I sent them money. And over time, I mean, part of the reason I started the cassette label was just the fact that, you know, I didn't want to just buy cassettes. I wanted to trade, you know, since people were willing to trade product, I, you know, figured, well, let me, you know, there's a lot of interesting things I'm starting to find. A whole range of music. I went from, you know, really weird pop stuff to noise to punk. I mean, especially in the early days. I mean, I think over time there was a, I don't know if a schism, but you know, if I go back to my early tapes or some of the early tapes I got from people, you know, a cassette compilation could have punk, noise, pop, folk, oddities. You could send something and 3 people could hear it and you were happy. It wasn't about making money, and it wasn't about making a living. It was about making music and connecting with people.
We wanted more, I think, back then for people to experience it on our level. The limited amount of access and the way the culture was. Now it's almost like it's too wide open, and it makes it harder to sound fresh because you're battling against really time and mortality. It catches up much more, I think, in the modern world because it's disseminated so much more quickly, and acceptance is much more fluid. Back then you had more opposition and more oppression from the norm.
It's a constant flow of things from garage sales. Recently there's like 7 new lunch boxes here, which I haven't quite figured out how to put up. I like figures. This is a nice item, is this still. This is a 6-gallon still, which I hope to fire up this summer. And then, you know, toys and like frogs drinking. This is an amazing item. Let's see if your camera can catch this. This is a nice pre-World War I German. But look at this. Can you see the inside of the... Do you see the figure inside? Yeah. That this was something that somebody had in World War II had gotten a lot of these because they would trade them for cigarettes, because cigarettes was money. and I knew that they existed, and I got this for $1 at a garage sale. What we're making is musical adventure, but the sweet spot in a long-term musical adventure piece is where you're transfixed in time, and it's as if, you know, you're just sort of first of all, you're transfixed, and time is nonsense at that point. Hypnosis has got a melody by Charles Ruggles that sounds like a hymn, but it has all of these other sounds that are coming out of a Kumar synthesizer, actually a little Casio running through a delay. And once those all hit exactly the right combination, then that transfixing feeling and moment happens. But it's not moment isn't what it is. It's this other element of time, where time is I guess it's standing still. And those are the real exciting pieces for me as well.
I think my style is always changing. I really couldn't say what it was in terms of a genre or a style, but looking back on all the work that I've produced over the many years, something unconscious that I was doing is using the spoken voice a lot.
What was that like?
Well, I can't show it you myself. I'm too stiff, and the gripper never learned it.
Chopping it up, mixing it up, turning it into sound. And I never had thought that this is what I'm setting out to do. But I see that it is kind of a theme for me. Not everything I do does that, but I would say, looking back on it, there's a lot of that in there. I really started off making, let's say, artwork with sound, doing painting with sound. It wasn't about the music, and I don't consider myself a musician, but I'm making collage that is audio collage. So I take real-world sounds, and in the old days, pre-sampler, taking them, using a splicing block, pushing things backwards and forwards on reels of tape. So when the sampler arrived, that was just a thing of beauty, because it was doing what I was doing, and it was a machine that was helping me do all of this stuff. That was just perfect for me. Take all those real-world sounds, record them, put them in the sampler, and manipulate them.
Well, it's making it so easy. I think technology is making it so easy for people. Whereas before you really had to work hard to get sounds. One of the things I did was I made my own tape loop. You know, I mean, there was loop machines, but I actually took apart a cassette, making my own loop in a cassette. And so we would play with loops. I have a whole box of cassettes that are just loops. And so you record on that loop live. That was wild. And so then you move it on, you stop it, start it, and the loop would just, you know, keep playing as you're, doing your performance. That was fun. Then you'd have 4 cassette players with loops in them, all going at the same time. And then you get the funkiest stuff, you know. We had little flat synthesizers, and we'd put weights on them, because how many hands can you do? You got your tape players going, you got your flat synthesizers with weights on them, duplicating some kind of sound, and then you're playing instruments. Right now I got acoustic basses, so I'm still recording. So acoustic basses, because I'm making music to do videos. I do videos for my mobiles, and so I'm making music, and I put it in the background of my mobiles. It's pretty cool. So I'm sort of like squeezing sounds and noise, and still they're having the visual of a mobile. I've made this mobile 10 feet big. These bars here. These are all my stainless steel bars in different sizes. You know, and when they get to be big mobiles, this is big bars. And with big bars, you have big tools. These are pedals. This is a wood mobile where I hand cut and polish each pedal. So that's the start of it. And I just start creating. And I start hanging. These are just small ideas.
One of our most recent projects, and I think what is kind of helping us get through these times of format insecurities, is doing a radio show every week, live improv with guests. And we do it from here, from our home studio, and broadcast it to Europe's oldest pirate radio station, and it's webcast from there. And we've done well over 300 in a row now. No matter where we've been able to grab a couple laptops. If we've got Wi-Fi, we can broadcast, and it's been really great because we've got an audience. You're on that razor's edge of improving with an audience there, but I can be sitting there with no pants on and it's okay, and I don't have to drag my equipment out of the house, and we can have wonderful guests, and they're not always here either. Sometimes we've actually had guests by Skype, and then we pipe that over to the radio station. So using the new technology. It's the radio show pretty much. Yeah, being able to do the radio show from here, it's expanded. It's gotten more delivered all the time. But we're able to use Nicecast on one computer, and then do all the PSAs, all the other thing on one other computer, and then I have one computer left to play. Unless I'm over on the other side playing with everybody else. But yeah, we're easily, and I also use the setup for recording VCO and everything else that we do. I think a lot of experimental music art is aggressively political just by its stance anyway. I think it's very valuable to do that. I think it culturally sits you in a place. I think that a lot of experimental artists tend to think about their place in the culture, and well, a lot of what art is and music is, and I'm blending the two, like the arts, is reflection, is the artist taking in all that's around them and regurgitating it through their little body filter. I don't think that I made the decision to be alternative, though.
Yeah, just are, right?
Yeah.
It just sort of happens because we like certain things. And
yeah.
Where that becomes political is because it becomes political by itself, because it's a decision to not really play the game.
We're not playing the game everybody else did.
Yeah, because a lot of people are just driven by money.
Right, and that frankly is not like a denominator. I've always worked at least enough to cover my job, you know, my bills and all that. So I'm not depending on the music to pay my bills, and I enjoy that, and I have to have it that way.
anyone who does this is in rebellion, because you don't want to be part of everybody else. You're not buying into what everybody's doing. It's expressing your individuality, which, you know, is less and less wanted. And so, as I kind of mentioned before, it's this kind of thing also. And again, it's not just music, but I mean, it's music. But if you're, you know, if you're an avant-garde writer or a filmmaker or any other form of that, it's not doing something that's commercially acceptable, then you are resisting.
What I like to do is try to leave as much political and social content and let the sound and music stand on its own. We feel like we've bought the product and we're not 100% satisfied, so by God, we're going to make our own and approach that aspect of it with an independence and a vision that focuses less on the pre-established and more on the new and unknown and more challenging.
The film is called The Three Trials. It's a feature film. It's on DVD now. I did it pretty much everything from writing and directing to cleaning the floors afterwards and getting pizza and all that, except for my close friend that did the camera work. So I had to learn how to edit. It was all new to me, and I just thought, like, you know, what the hell? I'm just gonna do this. And it was huge, but I just didn't have any energy or inspiration to work on music. So if you look at my discography, you'll see like there's this 5-year gap in there. That's when I was doing the film.
Our Sirius is a little bit of a response to the Sirius in it, and the whole like death and gloom, and let's be outrageous just so we can get attention, and yeah, you know, we'll all be dead soon enough. You know, you can deal with it until then. You know,
Architect's Office is focused primarily on releasing music through compilations as opposed to our own releases. So we've done upwards of 70 compilations. This was my concept, and the first thing we released is over there is cassette. It was just me. And So that meant that, you know, no matter what manifestation we went through, and one time I was living in low-income housing, and I didn't have a job or any money, and I had my son. And I had put up a flyer, and the authorities found out about it, and they called me in at the housing authority. You're making money. I said, we don't make any money. And she said, oh, so you're a volunteer group? And I said, yes. So actually, Architect's Office has been a volunteer experimental music making group all these years. The question of how I became acquainted with Stan Brakhage, or how Stan Brakhage, more importantly, how he became acquainted with the music of Architect's Office, goes back to '74, for example. I had known about Brakhage. I was in junior high. He did and I work at the library, Boulder Public, and he did a show at the Boulder Public Library. This was my first exposure to his films. So, you know, we're looking at Mothlight. He had already made it very famous movie in completed in '64, Dog Star Man, and had made some other brilliant films, including some epics as well. I was Brakhage's Faust, you know. He saw something in me that reminded him of, I suppose, himself, or at least his original screenplay of what he had written called Faust Film a long time ago. And then we had a fight, you know, 88 to 90. Then we became friends again and made a film in '96 called Through Wounded Eyes, in 2002, Song of the Mushroom, before he died the next year. 10 films altogether.
I dream a lot. I daydream about ideas before I even make them. You know, and I have a violin, electric violin, so I'm thinking I'm going to do electric violin, and I'm going to play the bass at the same time, plugging them both into sound effects. Just try anything. You know, if you like something, try to make it, but don't copy it. Just try to go for something like it. If you heard something in your head and you go, wow, I have something in my head, I think about some kind of sound or noise or grating things and rhythms, and you know, you just try to manipulate it and try to make it happen.
This is here for that divine spark of what's going to sound good with what they're doing right now. And I can come over here and grab one of 1,000 different kinds of... Look at this silly thing. It's a piece of metal with rings from Office Supply. But grandfather clock times. Yeah, it all pretty much works. But seemingly the batteries are long since dead. Oh, there's a little... Sometimes it's really nice with low batteries. You get another layer of strangeness because the batteries have died out.
shocked me to the things we used to do on grass. It would shock you to the things we used to do on grass.
But the main thing is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you love it? If you love it, that's all that matters, really. You're going to keep doing it. That's really always been my... I get up in the morning and I do those collages because I love doing collages and the handwork and the messiness, and you know, keep playing with different formats until you find the one that actually works for you. Have no format shame. They all do something slightly different. They all blend with each other. Sound, vision, lights, swimming, publishing, it all mixes.
The band name If Bwana, you know, is an acronym for "It's funny, but we are not amused," which partially just comes from my love of Monty Python, and you know, the sort of, it was always sort of their when their fake queen was like, "Oh, hello everybody," and so it was sort of like, and when I started in '84, it was like. Everyone had pseudo band names, so this is just, you know, this is, what do I call it? And one day it would just become If, so it was If, Bwana. Last night in Hudson, at a great little space called a Spotty Dog, a cafe, which is a bookstore, beer store, live performance space. I played with Guy Debiev, a Belgian composer and lap steel guitarist, and Peter Zumo, a trombone player. We performed a piece of Guy's, and this was the first time I played with him, and I was sitting there and I had some percussion instruments and a little Roland micro composer, mono synth, which was nice and very lap-sized. Even people get into this thing, there's, you know, a level of where they think there's, you know, I mean, from the get-go, people thought they were going to make a living or make money, or, oh yes, my cassette's going to sell, what, tens of millions? I mean, there weren't that many, but you know, even doing this can be for some people a way into, you know, maybe there's a way of, you know, I mean, I'm shocked that I made a living doing music, you know, as a career for 20 years or 20 plus. You know, again, it was working for record labels that were non-commercial record labels, but you know, I mean, I'm quite, you know.
All right, I get a rush buying things at garage sales, right? So. So I put them in a bag. I get a rush when I unload the bag. So then I take a picture of all the loot that I got at garage sales. Here I am at the Dead End Garage Sale Museum with all my loot. And then what I came up with on top of that was that this is a Friday map. This is kind of unusual. Is that I map out where I'm going. This is Boulder. It's got an odd set of streets and certain ways that you can go and not go. And then I diarize about what happened there and what I got. Now, who could pass up a binary counter like this? I like binary. This over here is like a part of a lot of the catalog and trade journal or zine type publication about Architect's Office that I keep all together down here. And there's might be more. This over here is the small version of the cassettes compilations. Sensationnel, which I always thought was super good, in Montville. We were lucky enough to get onto one of those. These are all more of the more elaborately packaged compilations that were on. I guess I really like Graf Halfen's The Book. That's a guy from Berlin that did this particular compilation. Like that a lot. The first cassette we did was this one. I think William Bennett and Malcolm McDowell and maybe 2 other people have these. I gave them to the other people. This was our first cassette. It's like maybe an edition of 5 to 8.